Alright, hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my first ever reading wrap-up, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to include all the books that I read in January and February because I didn't do one for January because I didn't have a channel yet. So I'm excited. I read a lot of 5-star reads in the past 2 months, so I'm very excited to tell you all about them. I'm going to go in chronological order. I think that's the best way. So a lot of these books were audiobooks or library ebooks, so I don't have a physical copy of all the books. So I think I'm gonna scoot over this way. Ooh, don't fall. So I'm gonna scoot over this way so I can show you the covers right here, if I can figure out how to edit them in. First book that I read in 2021, a little off brand. It was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. Now this is the first book of the Bridgerton series, and like many people, I watched the Bridgerton Netflix show at the end of December and became completely obsessed. So when I found out there was a book series that it was based on, I immediately got the first one. It was like a 2-star read for me. It wasn't great. It was very short. So there wasn't a ton of character development. I felt like the characters were very one-dimensional. And not to spoil anything, but if you've watched the show, there is a very uncomfortable scene where one of our main characters does something. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen the show. It's even worse in the book. So for me, the first book doesn't really stand on its own. I think that any enjoyment I got out of it was basically because I already liked the characters from the show. I do think I'll probably continue reading a few more books, like I'll probably read the next one before the second season comes out, but I don't know if I would recommend it. I'm not a huge historical fiction romance reader, but I definitely think there's better in the genre. Alright, then I read The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. Now, I was already a big fan of Emily St. John Mandel because I read her book Station 11, which was amazing, definitely a 5-star read. And so I was really excited to get into this one, and I really loved it. 4 out of 5, right off the bat, I'll let you know. The thing about Emily St. John Mandel's writing is it gives me like a magical quality to her stories. I always feel like there's gonna be a magical element almost, and there isn't. But it's just the way she tells these stories are like fairy tales almost. And The Glass Hotel focuses on 2 seemingly unconnected events, a Ponzi scheme bust up in New York City and the disappearance of a woman off of a ship, like a giant shipping vessel. These 2 events are connected somewhat through this hotel up in Canada that is catered to a high-class clientele and has, again, like a magical quality to it. I always expect there to be some magic to it, and there isn't, but it still has that kind of special sparkle in my heart, and I think that's due to her writing. So definitely recommend her work in general, and definitely liked this one. Alright, the third book that I read this year was Clean Sweep by Ilona Andrews, which is the first book in the Innkeeper Chronicles. I keep looking at my iPad because I don't remember all of these. This was another not great book. The beginning of January was not amazing for me. Now, I really like Ilona Andrews. Ilona Andrews is actually, fun fact, a husband-wife author duo. And they write a really, really great urban fantasy series that I love, the Kate Daniels series. And so that's why I kind of wanted to jump into this one. The Innkeeper Chronicles, an innkeeper. The Innkeeper Chronicles tells the story of Dina, who is a young woman who runs an inn in a small town in Texas. But in this world, her inn is not just like a bed and breakfast. It's actually a safe house for magical creatures, a portal between worlds. And it is her job to protect the inn and its inhabitants at all costs. Very interesting premise, and again, Ilona Andrews as a duo are really talented writers. They are great at sarcasm, wit, and that witty writing and characterization really shines in the Kate Daniels series, but I feel like this series just kind of lacked that. The characters weren't as spunky and entertaining to read they kind of fell a little flat for me. And the world in this series just wasn't as gripping and entertaining as the Kate Daniels series. I might read the next one, but probably not. Okay, now we are getting into like a week or two where I had nothing but 4 and 5 star reads. This was some of the best reading that I've done in years. The next book that I read was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal Motar. This was easily a 5 star read. This was so good. This is a very short novel. It was like 200 pages, 250 at most. This novel tells the story of two warring civilizations of very different origin and culture. One of them is kind of a almost robotic, gave me kind of Terminator vibes, and the other one is a more nature-oriented society. Now, these two civilizations have been battling each other for centuries, and they do so through space and time. So all of their kind of warriors travel through space and time to major events throughout history, and sometimes minor events throughout history, and kind of change things so that later down through the timeline it negatively affects the other army. Crazy. And that larger story is told through letters between these two women on each sides of this war. These two women are fighting through space and time, and everywhere they go they leave a letter, like a secret letter for the other one. And it first starts kind of taunting, and then it kind of grows into a real curiosity for the other culture that they're not taught about at all. And then it grows into love, and it's breathtaking. I really can't even stop talking about this book. I've told everyone I know about it because it's amazing. 5 out of 5. Honestly, one of my favorites I've read in years, if not favorite of all time. Then I read House of Earth and Blood, which is the first book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. So Sarah J. Maas is like the queen of young adult fantasy. Now, I don't read a ton of young adult. I have read her Throne of Glass, I think it's called, series, and I really liked the first 2 books, and then I think the 3rd book I was just like, eh. I think the love interest didn't, like, the love story didn't go the way I wanted, and I was like, I'm boycotting Sarah J. Maas forever. Because she's known for getting you attached to a love interest, and then the next book being like, never mind, there's a new love interest. But yes, it's probably more realistic than falling in love with one man and loving him for the rest of time, but I get attached easily, okay? House of Earth and Blood is a more urban fantasy than her previous work. It tells the story of Bryce Quinlan, who is a young woman, a young half-fae, living in the city. She is best friends with an alpha werewolf who, I don't think this is really a spoiler, it's kind of on the back of the book, but all of her best friends are murdered by a demon after we get really emotionally attached to them. So that's fun, love that for us. And then the rest of the story is her teaming up with this fallen angel to solve the murder of her friends. So we've got fantasy, romance, mystery. I liked it. I think I gave it a 3. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't incredible, but I liked it more than I thought I would. And I will definitely continue on with the series. So that's good to know. Here we are, guys. This is where the month took a turn. I finished this book on the 2nd of February. And it kind of turned all of my reading plans for the month. I read Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I'm a diehard Sanderson fan. We all know the Stormlight Archive is like my favorite series of all time. And this book actually came out in November. I was in a bit of a reading slump for most of 2020. I think a lot of people, with all the time that they had because of the pandemic, took that opportunity to read a lot more. I took that opportunity to be completely unable to focus and get barely any reading done. So when Rhythm of War came out, I just didn't have the emotional capacity to focus and give this book the attention that it deserved. And after reading those few books in January, I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to read this book. And I was not ready. I don't think anyone was emotionally prepared to take on Rhythm of War. This book, this is the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. This is like his magnum opus series. How do I describe this series? a desert with big crevices, these crazy high storms, three-ish main characters who is fighting a war on these shattered plains. Now, I just spent like 10 minutes trying to describe the Stormlight Archive series, and I just can't. So, if you like fantasy at all, just read these books. Just read it. Don't know anything about it, just read it. All right, the next book I read in February was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the first book in the Sixth World series by her. Now, this is another urban fantasy series. I was hoping, because I didn't really get what I wanted from the Innkeeper Chronicles, like that Kate Daniels vibe, that kind of sarcastic loner, mercenary, hot woman killing monsters vibe that I wanted. I decided to go into this series because I've heard nothing but amazing things. So I got what I wanted, I'll tell you that much. The Sixth World series follows Maggie, who is a monster hunter, and maybe monster herself, depending on who you ask. This world is a kind of dystopian fantasy future of North America, basically where global warming has completely destroyed society as we know it. This story takes place on what is now Navajo Nation, and all of the gods and monsters from Diné or Navajo folklore have come to life. And our story opens with Maggie being hired to find a missing girl who has been stolen by a monster, and then once she discovers this monster, goes on a quest to find out where this monster came from and to stop all of them. So yeah, Trail of Lightning was exactly what I wanted out of an urban fantasy. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm very excited to continue on with the series. Now we're moving on to another 5 out of 5, 15 out of 5, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never been done before novel. We have The Deep by Rivers Solomon. So The Deep was inspired by an idea or a story by David Diggs, who we all know and love, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. But then Rivers Solomon wrote the actual novel. Again, this is a really short novel, like 200 pages, but so impactful and moving in those numbered pages. The Deep tells the story of a colony of mermaids in the Atlantic Ocean who originated from the pregnant women that were thrown off of slave ships during the slave trade. So this colony of mermaids has like a The Giver style situation where only one person in their colony has all of the memories of their collective experience. The Deep tells the story of the one keeper of memories for this community and how she struggles with that memory and about sharing it with the rest of her community, as well as her own journey as an individual and as a culture. It's about generational trauma, it's about love and community, it's about I just loved this book. Rivers Solomon is such a talented writer. This is the first book I've ever read by them, but I will definitely be reading anything else that they write because this book was so moving. All right, then I read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. This book was really good, very informative. I think it would be a really good place to start in your education and work in anti-racism. I think it has a really good foundation for people who are just starting to learn about it. I think it's organized very well. He kind of separated out the chapters into different forms that racism can take and then told the history of that kind of racism, kind of examples of how that affects Black people to this day, and then kind of personal anecdotes about how those forms of racism can take place. So it's very interesting, it's very informative, but also kind of helps you contextualize racism in your everyday life. Yeah, so I definitely recommend it. I mean, definitely anyone can read it. I really enjoyed it. And I think that especially if you're looking to just kind of get into anti-racism work, this is obviously, just by the title, a really great place to start. Then I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book was another 5 out of 5 stars. This book was so moving. This book is about a group of magical kids who live at an orphanage on this beautiful island, and about a man who works for a government agency that is responsible for making sure that these orphanages are safe places for the kids, but also making sure that the rest of the population is safe from the kids. Now he goes to the house in the Cerulean Sea to ensure that this orphanage is up to code, and about him meeting all of the kids and the man who runs the orphanage, and about him learning to love them. I kind of think of this book as like happier, cozier X-Men, but Magneto and Professor X get married at the end. Then I read Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is a translated work from Japanese. Again, another really short novel. A lot of these were very short and still really impactful. This is a short novel that tells the story of a woman who works at a convenience store. Now Kiko, the convenience store woman, is a little bit different from everyone else. She has been since she's been a child. She just doesn't really pick up on social cues and experience emotion the same way that everyone else does. And so she finds a lot of comfort in the routine of working at the convenience store and really makes it a part of her identity. This book tells her story of trying to navigate the world as a grown woman with a job in a convenience store, and all of the pressure that comes from her friends and family and their expectations for what she should be and what her life should be versus what she actually wants to do with her life. I liked it. It was short, it was to the point. I really liked Kiko, and I was very frustrated when people just didn't let her do what she wanted to do. So yeah, I really liked it, but I don't know if it will stick with me and impact me the way that like The Deep and This Is How You Lose the Time War did. So 3 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend if you want another short read. Really cute, liked it. And then because I had just finished Rhythm of War and was just back on my Sanderson bullshit, I decided to read all of the Mistborn series. Each one of these was a 5 out of 5 stars, completely perfect in every way. So the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson is another high fantasy series that ties into his greater Cosmere universe. It focuses mainly on our main character, Vin, who is a young girl who kind of grew up on the streets and kind of grew up in the criminal underworld, and all of the men who she grew up around severely mistreated her. Vin then runs into a man named Kelsier, who is a kind of really big infamous crime boss in this world, and from there a heist ensues. This has been widely known as like magical Ocean's 11, and that's exactly the vibe that we get from this book. The magical system in Mistborn is just like every other Brandon Sanderson novel. Perfection. The characters swallow vials of different metals and use those metals to push and pull things, to affect people's emotions, to be stronger. And like I always say, the more Brandon Sanderson you read, the greater context you have for the entire extended universe, and the more you just grow to appreciate the brilliance. And then the last book that I just finished for February is Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis, the one and only. As I'm sure you all know, Angela Davis is an icon and a living legend. This book is, I believe, her 3rd book. This book tells the history of the women's liberation movement and about how focused it was solely on middle-class white women. It goes a bit into the history of slavery and focuses on the intersection of racism and sexism and the exclusion of Black women from women's liberation. Like I said, Angela Davis is an icon and a legend. She is the smartest person I've ever heard of. She's an incredible mind. I want to read her entire bibliography. She is just someone I look up to so much. Just again, what a mind, what a life, what a woman. Just we bow down to Angela Davis. All right, finally, we have gotten through all the books that I read in January and February. I had a pretty good 2 reading months, if I do say so myself. I really liked most of the books that I read, and even the ones that I gave 2 stars. I think think it was the Innkeeper Chronicles and the Bridgerton one that I gave 2 out of 5 stars. And both of those, I'm still probably gonna give the next book in the series a chance. So overall, definitely grade 2 reading months. And now that I'm on BookTube, I'm sure I'm going to be reading even more and feel the peer pressure to actually read all of the books that I showed in my owned TBR video. So thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more, and I will let you know what I'm reading when I start another book. Probably right now. Bye.